It's the chicken and the egg story. Do you start with your faith and build business? Do you build business and, faith comes along somewhere along the way. It was my father's faith and then his desire to go do something with that faith that the company started. How do I have something self-sustaining to support the ministry that I know I'm supposed to go into? And it was a totally different path than he thought he was going to go down.
Welcome to the Story on Purpose podcast, where we hear from visionary leaders who have a compelling purpose. Now, I'm a sucker for stories, but this is about more than that. We explore the how behind the why that has made a great impact on the customers, team members, community. How to go from lofty vision to tangible results. Today we hear from Derek Kassebaum, co-owner of Cosmos Corporation, a legacy project and a story that's been 4 decades plus in the making. We're going to open this conversation with a question today. What do you get when you mix pet shampoo, 5 family members with very unique giftings and skill sets, and a mission to serve the poor around the globe to the glory of God? What do you get? Tom, I'll let you answer.
Cosmos.
The Cosmos Corporation, which is where we are recording this story, behind the story today. The Cosmos Legacy Project, 4 decades plus in the making.
That's right.
And you can probably go back further than that if you wanted to. This project itself has been 2+ years in the making. And it's
crazy.
It's been full of exciting moments on our end as the producers of the project, challenging moments of frustration, questioning, like all the things that happen in business, a project, and otherwise. And on your end, as a family, we've gone through COVID together since this conversation started. And now we're recording this in 2023, and everything's calm and figured out by now, right?
That's right. We got a war in Europe, gas prices high, everything you want in business to figure it out and go, hey, we can do this.
Yeah, exactly. So we are recording this at the Cosmos headquarters in St. Peters, Missouri, just outside St. Louis, Missouri.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So as I think about this project and the big takeaways from it, the biggest one for me is that really just it seems like business is just so easy and everything just kind of happens together. And especially if you're a faith-driven business, then it's extra easy. It's like God just sprinkle dust and everything just happens the way you want it to. Is that right?
Pretty much so. That yeah.
Far from it is the reality, right?
Well, that was actually my big takeaway. Is that it seemed so beautiful,
beautiful, not easy, right?
I walk into this place and I'm like, wow, everything seems so perfect. And I was like, oh my gosh, these brothers doing business together. How cool. Must have been beautiful.
Yeah. Over 30 years.
And it was lots of beauty, but I found out that there was also lots of hard times throughout. And that was my big takeaway. So
yeah.
Are we done with the podcast?
Okay, all right, great. Well, thanks for joining. So
I didn't get to say my takeaway.
Well, please do.
No, it's funny because there was on our end, we are sitting here being guided by you guys. So now you're trying to get to know us and guide us through the whole project, and it was kind of cool to sit on this side and be able to remember all those stories and have to dig through everything again and go, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, remember that. Whether it's good, bad, indifferent. It was kind of cool just to go back through the memories again and go, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Did that help you at all? Like, has there anything been gained since?
Oh man, so much.
Just by going through that process with us?
That process again, even, and we'll talk about this, and you'll see it on the video, but, my parents are involved and stuff like that. And for my mom to call and just say, hey, remember that one time? I'm trying to find, what year was that? And just sparking those conversations again, I'm like, oh, I forgot about that one. Because what was important to me or was not important to me is either important or not important to someone else in the family. It's like, oh yeah, that was important. Even my brother's cancer. I was the one who drove him to the hospital in the middle of the night, when I had just had an automobile accident, wasn't supposed to carry anybody, and I put him over my shoulder and carried him to the hospital. And when Darren's talking about his cancer and the things he learned, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that was the time. So it's neat to bring all those stories together as one major story unfolding.
Awesome. And so for introductions, Derek Kassebaum is one of the 4 Kassebaum sons. 6 kids in your family, but the 4 brothers really took the company over as your dad and mom started it together.
Yeah, I'm number 5.
You're number 5?
Yeah, I'm not the youngest.
Okay. Not the baby. That's Denver, right?
That's Denver.
Okay. Well, Denver.
Yeah, there's my father, Don, my mom, Barb. Don is my oldest brother. Then we have a sister, Carol, Darren, Darlene, Derek, and Denver.
Awesome. And all of those family members are in the project, have a voice talking about how this company was built and how difficult it was and how God showed up along the way many times.
That's right.
So as we record, this podcast, my big takeaway from doing this project is the authenticity and vulnerability that you and your family approached this project with, telling the stories and not just sugar-coated stories of, times were a little hard and then we nailed it. It's like, no, we really walked through the challenges and from a practical business standpoint to also a faith component. How does that tie in? And it's not always crystal clear. And this clip from the project really highlights that, a story of being near bankruptcy to a real pivotal moment that propelled them into a new category.
One day, a lady, her name was June, I forget, I don't know her last name, I forgot. She owned a grooming business on Clayton Road. And she was getting her hair done, and the beautician there was using the shampoo system to put shampoo on her hair. And that lady, June, asked the beautician, why can't I put this in my grooming salon? And you gotta remember, this is 85, and we're dying fast. And if we needed 2 nickels to get to the other side of town, we weren't going to the other side of town. That lady calls us, and she asked if we could put that system in her grooming salon. And here I am saying, I don't think so. And in my mind, I'm saying, this is a grooming salon. We're big time. We're in the beauty salon. Who wants to be in the pet business in those days, And she wouldn't stop calling. And so finally, one day came, and me and my dad decided we're going to do this.
And we actually, I think you saying that, it's the chicken and the egg story. Do you start with your faith and build business? Do you, build business and, faith comes along somewhere along the way. With us, it was the faith aspect first. As you'll know in the story, and you guys have, heard all my parents' stories, it was my father's faith and then his desire to go do something with that faith that the company started. And within that, we were faith first, then company. Mm-hmm. There's some people that are actually company first, and then it's like, okay, how do I integrate that faith into the company? And both are a challenge. Right.
Yeah. And to the point, the faith did lead the way. And as your dad really leaned into his faith, dad and mom, it wasn't, I need to leave business to go into ministry. It was, no, we can have a ministry through our business. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Many times you'll see ministries built, and unfortunately they do galas and fundraisers and that to support the ministries. And my dad's desire was never that. His desire was, how do I have something self-sustaining to support the ministry that I know I'm supposed to go into? And it was the building of that. And it was a totally different path than he thought he was going to go down. He was going one direction, and God created the path over here for another direction, which was the pet industry that he would have never thought he would have been in it.
Yeah, and we go into detail of that because it started as a beauty supply distributorship to support salons, transitioned to pet shampoo. So you can watch the project to get into that, but one thing we didn't go into a whole lot of detail in the project was what your dad and mom did is they really not left the company, but kind of left full time in the early 90s, and that was the mission and their passion. So talk a little bit about the nonprofit Gifts of Love that stemmed from this.
Yeah, so the way they got to that was my dad, like you said, was a barber, wanted to go into the mission field, bought a company that he thought was going to supply all those resources, and 2 weeks after he bought it, it's going down instead of going up. And that created him and my mom from praying every day, deep prayers at 3 o'clock in the morning of God sustain us, God get us through. And I think it was that time in the 80s, literally from 1980 to 1992, that developed their faith in God. And then in 1992, Hurricane Andrew hit in Miami, Florida, and they headed off to Miami, Florida, and met a group from Guatemala and just knew that God had called them into Central America. The way they knew that was they just fell in love with these people, and they thought, let's go down and see what God is going to do for us in Guatemala, or do in Guatemala, and started driving to Mexico, or driving to Guatemala through Mexico.
And you were there?
I went in 88 the first time. Yeah. And it was crazy. We went in 88 the first time. And then in 1992, they came back. They bought an old 79 Ford Scout, put big tires on it, bucket seats that they got in a junkyard that were really comfortable, and built this 4-wheel drive vehicle to go up in the mountains of Guatemala and serve the people. They took aid there over the years with Chiquita bananas, empty containers, and stuff like that. But today, it's thriving. We feed over 800 different kids in Guatemala every day, or in Haiti every day. We have a medical clinic in Haiti. In Guatemala, we have a children's home, and we're working with the government to help them. How do you actually rule righteously? We put programs together for that, and we help churches. There's about 65 churches that we help give guidance to. So it all started with, I wonder if I could have a business that could support me to go into ministry. Yeah. And then 40 years later, you got this.
Right, yeah. So Gifts of Love International is the name of the nonprofit. So you have the ministries in Haiti and Guatemala, orphanages, feeding kids, and what you talked about is building leaders within that community. And I love that aspect. Yeah. It's not just let's, provide care and love. That's a big part of it. But now it's also building up leaders within their communities so that they can thrive and flourish.
Right. And I know you build legacy videos, okay? But this is building legacy. Right. Because it's not just ours, but it's other families' legacies. You don't realize that as you're doing these things, you're actually building other families' legacies. And you guys have both said you were touched by our project. So it's touching your legacies too into the future, whatever means that is. So I just thought of that. It's just a ripple effect.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into the story behind the story as Tom and I connected and as our paths crossed, because there are so many components as I reflect on it that, man, I've learned so much through the process. And from a faith perspective, I can't deny that God's had a hand in this without everything being totally clear the whole way, of course, because that's just not how it works. So the story begins really with my wife and I moving back to St. Louis with our son in the summer of 2020. A mentor of mine, I was working on storytelling, had launched my business, and we're doing brand video stories and work that I was proud of. And a mentor of mine said, what about this concept of a legacy project? Jeff Rogers is his name. He's chairman of One Accord out of Seattle, Washington, where we had previously lived. So Jeff planted this seed of telling a long-form documentary story in really high quality, Netflix quality, of a business legacy, a family legacy. And I love the idea. I started pursuing it through conversations, probably had 24 or more conversations with people, a lot of wealth advisors talking about the concept, would it work for their clients? There was always a lot of interest, and then there's the question of, well, yeah, let me see one. I'm like, okay, well, I don't really have one per se, but we had other work we could show. And so all this is happening. At this point in my business on my website, I didn't mention anything about legacy projects. The only way anyone would know about it is if they talked to me and we talked about the concept. So I'm at it virtual. This is, in 2020, and I'm watching this presentation from ACG St. Louis, Association for Corporate Growth, which was a client for me and has been a great relationship as an organization. It's non-faith based. And I see the CEO of Cosmos Corporation presenting, Landon Hobson. And he's talking about their growth, even through the pandemic, some of the growth and the growth story of the company over the past 5 years. But then he talks about the orphanages and the ministries in Haiti and Guatemala. And part of the mission statement is to serve the poor around the globe. And I'm just like, wait, what? This is a thing? This is a company? So through Amy Rubsum, the executive director for ACG, I got connected to Landon, and he graciously took a Zoom call with me. I can remember where I was on the back porch of my in-laws' house. And Landon and I are talking, getting to know each other. Landon and I are about the same age, young families. And he says, John, I'm so glad I'm talking to a storyteller. Here's what I need. Now, I hadn't mentioned anything about legacy. And he proceeds for the next 20 minutes to lay out the concept of a legacy project and telling me some of the backstory of the family business and the transition of leadership to him and his team a few years ago, and just the importance of preserving and capturing the stories so that both the family members of all the 100 Kassebaum grandkids, or how many are there?
47. No, the grandkids, there's 27.
27, okay, yeah.
47.
Big family. So, So 6 Kassebaum kids, and you all have big families, and so a lot of grandkids and so on. And so some of those grandkids are in the business now, leading it, and just the idea of capturing the legacy and the stories so that they live on. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Because, for me, I would have said, I could tell the legacy story of any business. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be faith related, but if that's a component and they're doing great things, even better. So I couldn't have orchestrated that.
Right.
So that was in the fall of 2020. Well, right around that time, Tom Herbig and I got connected, and we started ideating on projects we would do together. Well, he and his team had just been wrapping up a really awesome project on a public-private partnership in Pontiac, Michigan, rebuilding Pontiac after the loss of GM in the 2008 recession. So, Tom, I'll let you talk a little bit about that when we connected, just the work that you had been doing, because that project is excellent, and I encourage everyone to check it out. On Tom's website, wildcurious.com.
Got it.
You'll see the Pontiac piece, because it's a great template for a successful public-private partnership. But we met, and what was your takeaway on that?
Well, I was at the time trying to find projects that were making a positive impact in the world. Got connected with Bill Pulte of Pulte Homes, and he was like, you got to see what's going on in Pontiac, Michigan, where there were people going door to door in those neighborhoods, asking the neighbors, what do you want to see? What do you like about your neighborhood? And then cleaning up the stuff that they want to get rid of and whatnot. And
yeah, what a novel concept to ask the actual stakeholders on the ground of what they want and need. And that's why it's been successful. So check out that project on wildcurious.com, the Pontiac, Michigan piece. It's excellent. So at that time, again, I couldn't have orchestrated. I was working with a great production team called LP Creative on some other projects, but I didn't have the documentary experienced team. Well, enter Tom, enter the conversation with Landon. So this is fall of 2020. And so for me, okay, I'm talking to the CEO of this company, and he wants this project. So surely it's going to happen. It's going to happen next week. It's going to start, right? Well, that's not how business works. Yeah. So eventually we lined up a meeting with you and your brothers actually in this room right before Christmas of 2020. And I'll share this component. God had really been working on me in the previous couple years on some number of different things, taking me into a new season, a lot of correction on some things in my heart. So I had been hearing a name from multiple business networking people would bring up the name Derek Kassebaum. And I said, well, I think I'm going to meet him because I've been talking to the CEO of his company and we've talked about this project. We finally meet. And at that point, I meet you and the brothers and outline the idea of the project and some questions and this and that. And I said, well, let's get together for coffee. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember this, but you said, okay, but it'll have to be in February. This is December 2020. You said it'll have to be in February because I'm going to Tanzania next week with this St. Louis businessman who just got a gold mine. Like, oh, of course, yeah. Well, let's make it February.
That's what everybody does during COVID.
Right, yeah. Going to the gold mine, which in its own right is an incredible story that's continuing to play out. That'll be another podcast for another time.
Absolutely.
But you and I get together for coffee, and I'm starting to share some of the details of my personal story, not going into much detail. Then you open up and just really vulnerably share your story, and my jaw just drops.
Yeah. 2020 was a big change for us. I mean, it's funny because we went into 2020. My wife and I just went through a big change in our marriage for the better in 2019. And in 2019, we go into 2020. Everything's good. Then March hits. COVID comes, and this other word that hit that you hear a lot nowadays, but you did not hear a lot before COVID, which was pivot. And it's a pivot. And during that time, we were bringing in a new executive team, Landon was, I think, 2 years into it as far as the CEO of our company. And we were going through changes in our marriage and stuff like that. But there was so much that was to be told inside of me that whenever I would sit down with someone, I just wanted them to know my story because there was so much change that had happened inside of me. So when I was actually starting to write a book in July of 2020, I had actually made that decision and then come in about things, and we'll talk about later, but things that had happened in my life over the last 8 years. I met with a lady named Nancy Erickson who helped me write the book. She was my editor. And she said, "Hey, where are you from?" And I told her, and she said, "There's a guy that's going to do a story out there on a company that's a pet shampoo or pet company." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know anything about it. And I'm one of the owners, so I know about it. And I'm the kind of like the lead in St. Louis for our company. You know, I'm the face on the company in St. Louis." And I said, "Who is it?" And one thing led to another. And I contacted Landon and I said, "So what are we doing?" And he said, "No, just contact John." And you and I had the opportunity to sit down, and I was sitting with you to get an understanding of what you were wanting to do with our company. And what I wasn't realizing what was happening is I was building a deep friendship with a guy. And because we both, over that next 45 minutes to an hour, laid out our lives and just opened up of what was happening. And I think that actually allowed us in the legacy video just to become more vulnerable, more open, and that this is a company that we can trust that will help us tell our story best. And that's not a plug in this. That's literally, as I'm thinking through it now, probably what helped us be most vulnerable as we did, because you and I were vulnerable that first meeting.
Yeah, and I give you the credit because I was being pretty vague, and you then really laid it out, and I was like, okay, now I'm going to lay it out too. And I shared with you a verse that I was saying at the time I'm going to get tattooed. Mm-hmm. And I said, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will make your path straight or direct your steps. And you said, do you remember, right after I mentioned that verse?
I knew that I had just been preaching on that or something like that.
The day before.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said,
right.
yesterday I just gave a whole talk.
A whole seminar on that, yeah.
Based on those two verses, and I'm like, all right, this is too much in a good way. And so, from there, that was February. And this is where, and I'll be curious to hear your take on this because you are a salesperson and that's how you really built your career in the business through sales. So for me, now I'm having this great connection with you, which I'm seeing is way deeper than the story of Cosmos and it's going to have its own benefits.
Right.
And the project just wasn't happening. And there was a few reasons why. There was concern, okay, is Don, your dad, he's 80 now. And it's like, is he going to be up for it? We want to make sure everyone's comfortable. And it just wasn't happening. I was getting frustrated because I'm like, yeah, let's get this going. But it wasn't happening. And then I'm thinking, okay, God, is the whole reason you brought this relationship because of our relationship and where that could and would go? And fortunately, both are true.
Yeah.
You were receiving an award as a top workplace, Cosmos was, and that's what really kicked off the project. We showed up to shoot this event. It was an outdoor event of celebration. It was a party. It was a kickoff for summer, and it was to celebrate this top workplace. Well, in St. Louis, if you're celebrating something in the summer, it's going to be hot. It was a 100-degree day. I remember, 100 degrees on the dot. And we show up with our production team. There's about 5 of us. And we got there early to start setting up. Well, there was a few people outside working on the grills. And it was Derek and his brothers flipping burgers, getting ready for all the employees who were inside in the air conditioning. Tom, what do you remember about that?
Well, I mean, the big thing that I took away was how happy people were there. You're working manufacturing, like you're doing like repetitive task here, and people are happy and enjoying each other's company. And I just didn't envision that. I didn't know anything about the manufacturing, or I don't know, what do you call this?
Manufacturing.
Is it manufacturing? Yeah. I didn't know anything about that business, but I had heard horror stories about, people not being happy in that environment, in that workplace. And I came in here and just saw all these happy faces and people pumped up about working. And this was this was before even people came outside to enjoy the day, and just back there crushing it out. And I think there were some of your family members back there, hanging out, and so that was really cool to see. And then I don't know, I love my team and my crew, and we're just having a blast. And yeah.
Well, and that was
is that what you were looking for?
Yeah,
John?
for sure. Because I had enough exposure to the company and to Landon, and heard the story and met the brothers. I knew this was a special place, and I'd experienced it, but you and the rest of our team hadn't, and I hadn't really prepped you for that one way or the other. So I'm overhearing you and our team just having these conversations like, something's different here, like it's tangible. And yes, it was an event that was a celebration, so you could chalk it up to that, but it was more than that. And in the course of the next 9 months, we spent enough time here on a mundane random Thursday to see, no, this is legit. This is the culture they've built, and that doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, and what's really cool is as you were talking, Tom, I was trying to think. I'm like, well, we have five pillars in our company, and without naming them all, the fourth one is be willing to make the coffee for someone. That all started with what Landon saw when he came in as CEO. What we were doing is we'll never ask anybody to do anything that we wouldn't be willing to do ourselves. And as you saw, my brother Don flipping burgers and my brother Denver flipping burgers and stuff like that. I was staying in the shade, keeping my hair clean. I had to give the presentation that day. That pillar there is what Landon actually came in when he was CEO. He would come in before anybody else got here and make the coffee, make sure all coffee pots were full of coffee. So when people arrived, the coffee was made. And that's servant leadership. And I think that's probably what you saw that day is that usually isn't what happens. Usually you got a team here and you got your CEO at the top. It's like, okay, everybody get to my vision. And what Landon has built is actually upside down, which is, here's my vision. How can I help you get up and out as far as you can go in this company? And I think that's just the difference, is that's the glorifying of God that we put at the end. Is I think that glorifies God when we do that, when we prefer someone else over ourselves.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of what I've learned from your story and a few other businesses I've had close exposure to is both can be true. This is how to run a good, successful company, and it is how to love and serve people at the same time. It's not one or the other. It's not at the expense of profits, right? You still are a business. You have to be profitable.
That's right. And you still have to do your job as an employee. You have to show up. You have to perform. You have to do those things. Yet there's grace for you when there is a mistake. And you're not just a number, you are a name, because everybody is a name. And one thing that I would sit with my salespeople when my sales team, when I would be with them, is your family comes first. So make sure that you call home and make sure that it's okay. You take that trip before you schedule that trip. Make sure everybody else, because that's why we work. We don't come into work going, man, this is where I want to live my life. We come into work so we can have a life outside of work. And that's what we know every employee comes in to do is they don't really want to be here every day. They probably have a dream to be somewhere else. How can we help you get to that other place?
Yeah, love it. And we've seen it as our team has just been part of this company from kind of a third-party view.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about our first day of interviews. The first interviews we did after that day of celebration were with your parents, Don and Barb. And, Don, your dad, opened in prayer. I wasn't shocked, but I was like, oh, this is cool. So, before we started interviewing, he opened in prayer. Tom, what was your takeaway? We spent about 6 hours with Don and Barb capturing their stories, taking breaks, but it was fun. What was your takeaway from that first day of shooting?
Well, I think anytime you can open in prayer or a place of gratitude and, get on the same page with everybody, it just makes for a much better scenario. So that started the day out beautifully. Our team had set up, and then we were all there, and we were like, okay, we're here, and Don's leading us in a beautiful prayer. So that was cool. And I mean, every time we get into interview scenarios, like especially 6-hour interview scenarios, my mind is not. It's hard to pay attention to the story. I got to hear the story pretty much afterwards, so I didn't capture that much. I'm making sure all the cameras are working, all the audio sounding good, but I just remember it being really nice and beautiful and chill, and just It was beautiful. I mean, just hearing people's legacy, it got me thinking about the legacy, that my grandparents have and the people in my family have, and how I want to tell those stories. And yeah.
And so the next day we show up for our next day of interviews with you and your brothers, and Tom comes to me before we started shooting, before we came in the door. Do you remember what you said?
Why don't we start in prayer, John?
Yeah, he says, John, why don't we start in prayer this morning? I'm like,
well done, Tom.
I'm like, heck yeah, all right, yeah, let's do that. And then he goes, we should pray before everything we do. I'm like, darn it, yes. So we do now, and I just love it because the influence there truly was your mom and dad, and his leadership that we saw and have now imparted. And for any, I joke, for any Christian out there, I feel like if another Christian was to come to me and say, you should start in prayer, I would roll my eyes.
Yeah.
But just the way we experienced it so authentically, it softened my heart to that, like, okay, I got it, Christian, start in prayer. But it's been cool on this journey together, Tom, as we've worked to do that.
It's been beautiful.
Awesome. So I now want to talk about, the project itself. As you watch it, it truly has a lot of elements of drama because the family, you were so open and vulnerable about products that flopped and, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars lost because of it.
Who told you that?
Darren, your brother. You can take it up with him. And here's a clip from the project of Darren sharing one of those stories.
As we looked around the market, we realized, you know what everyone's doing? They're coming out with dog treats. So let's come out with a dental chew and put the good ingredients in it from the oral care, and it'll be a home run. And we did market research on this one. And our customers were saying, oh man, we'll buy it. Oh, this will be amazing. We trust your brand. You're the brand that should be doing this. And so we launched it. And we launched it in January of 2014, and immediately it took a nosedive.
Our first order, I remember, showed up to us, and the bags were just deflated. They were all sucked in. And it turns out it was because they were produced at a higher elevation in Colorado, shipped to us, and it just took all that oxygen out.
And that's a problem, because when they seal the bags there, there's certain air pressure in the bag. When they send it to 700 feet here, the bag sucks in. So they came in like sucked in as if there was nothing in the bag. And instead of the bag standing up nice on the shelf, the top of it would fall over. About 30% of the bags came in and the seals hadn't sealed, so they were open to the air. Those that were sealed, we did ship them out. They didn't look the greatest because they were falling over, but we had orders, and so we had to ship them. And so these products that we did go ahead and ship out with the funky looking tops, they arrived at the stores. By the time you get to June and it's heating up, these people are looking at their bags and there's moths flying around in the bags. And so it was just failure after failure after failure.
But, and tragedy, two people killed in a crash. One of your best friends was one of, So you open up about these really difficult moments.
Right. Yeah, it's hard. The Bible says that a good man will leave an inheritance for their children's children. I think that's Proverbs 13:22. And a lot of us think of that as, money, resource, things like that. But I think legacy is inheritance, is what wisdom, what knowledge can I pass on to my children's children's children? And I remember going into this this idea of this whole thing years ago, probably 10 years ago. My dad would up to about 10 years ago. My dad would come home from Guatemala, and my mom would sit there, and they tell us all these stories, myself and my brothers, on a Monday morning when we're meeting for prayer. And they'd say, "Well," I'd say, how'd your week go when you guys were in Guatemala?" And he'd tell us these stories. One day I asked him to wait afterward, and I said, "Dad," I said, "have you ever written these down?" I said, "for your grandkids or the next generation." And he goes, "No." And I go, "You really need to write them down, create a book, do something." And what I love about coming into this video is sometimes it's hard to express in a book what you're trying to say in a facial expression. Like you said, you see a lot of the raw emotion. You see a lot of that in the video that you normally don't get in a book. Even I've written a book, and we'll talk about that later again. Not to plug. But I'm just joking. But I thought about that with books versus video, and that's what we love about this project is you get to see the real heartbeat of someone, whether they made a mistake and we're like, oh, we made a mistake, or that's what I learned in that mistake. And this is what I would suggest you guys do. And that was our heartbeat of this video, is so that in generations to come, as the company's still here, is they understand what foundations did we build on, what was our dreams, and you're going to have your own dreams, but what can we impart to you so you can take on and be successful for yourself?
What's beautiful is that there's so many things to take away from the video. There's so many little pieces along the way, but it only takes one thing to change somebody's life.
That's right.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head being put on the spot.
Sure.
I had something.
Yeah.
I lost it.
Well, I'll jump into one, and then maybe you'll think of yours.
Okay.
A story that I have used in presentations myself is door number 4. Mm-hmm. And it was in the late 80s. At this point, you had started selling shampoo, but you weren't making it. And the supplier passed away. And the wife of the supplier, it was your only supplier at the time, said she's going to shut the business down. She had some other resources. She didn't need it.
Yeah.
So she was going to shut it down. Well, you guys were up against the wall. Like, okay, well, we have all these orders we got to fulfill. And you tell the story of how she offered to sell the business, and your dad and you had come to, your family had come to a price that you thought was fair. Well, she asked for more. And it was like, okay, God, you're shutting this door. We don't know what we're going to do, but okay, we're not going to buy it at that price.
Right.
Marie.
And then,
Marie.
tell us about Marie and how she entered the story in a way that you couldn't have orchestrated.
Yeah, it was amazing. I actually was walking around that warehouse that day when my dad was, trying to buy the company, and then all of a sudden the lady said we couldn't buy, we couldn't come up with the price that she had offered, and we said, well, can we just buy product? And we asked Marie, because we were like their biggest customer at that time, and we were buying maybe $2,000 or $3,000 a month of shampoo from them. And Marie walked us through and told us everything we needed to buy. And when we walked away, we got it for just pennies on the dollar. And then we turned to Marie and we said, Marie, would you actually come and teach us how to make shampoo? And she said yes. And then we said, would you give us the formulas? She said no. But after a year of her doing it, we learned the formulas, but she taught us how to actually make shampoo, and we kind of perfected it over the years. But it was just your verse. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll make your path straight. We were trusting God to walk through this. We were not leaning on our own understanding, because our own understanding would do this. And then all of a sudden we're just like, God, you got to have this. So we acknowledge him. And all of a sudden he's just making this path that we were not expecting. And, you were talking about things that you remember in the video. As I was looking through the video, even myself, I know the story. And then Darren tells a story of a guy named Ted Kent. I like Darren's way he talks about Ted Kent.
Yeah, British guy that looks like the guy from Jurassic Park.
That's right.
What he says.
And one thing that Ted said to Darren when Darren had cancer in 1990 was, Darren, I have a word over my life. And he goes, and my word is for you. That's legacy. That's passing on. That's a ripple effect. And it's cool, those things that you just, man, even for myself as being part of the story, all of a sudden you go, I can take that for myself. So as people watch our video, it's stuff that they can take for themselves, not just, oh, that was good for them. It's like, no, you can actually take and impart these principles, these thoughts, these things that you get from it into your life, like praying when my dad prayed. All of a sudden you did it. So
yeah, I love it. And it's the depth that you went into the stories, not just, we had a problem and it was solved and, God provided a way. It's like, no, let's really sit in the difficulty of that moment and honor that and recognize it. Because we don't always want to do that as competitive people, even as Christians, whatever you want to say, like business people. We just want to talk about, yeah, we had a challenge, we got through it. Now we're doing great.
Right.
And this story, this project is not that. It is walking through the valleys and acknowledging how difficult that was. Your sister, one of your sisters, telling the story how she couldn't even ask her parents for $3 to buy a school supply because didn't have it. And this clip from the project includes that story.
I was in a Christian high school, and I was taking French class, and one of the requirements for the classes that I needed a French Bible. And I remember going home, had a couple weeks to come up with that $3, but my parents, things were so tight, I knew I could not ask them for $3. And so I just kept praying, God, I need $3. I didn't have a job, had no money, kept checking my purse. No, there was nothing there. So finally, it was the night before, and I reached down in my purse one more time, and I realized that there had been a hole in the bottom coin section of my purse, and there was $3 there. I was just so touched. I'm like, God, you provided for me. And, right now we can look at this big, beautiful building, and we can say $3, what's that? But for me back then, that $3 was, I believe, a springboard of faith.
She's in high school. Like that's a challenging, situation to be in. And so the story, the overall story dives into these details. Tom, anything come to mind you want to share?
I mean, the big takeaway for me, and the thing that I loved so much, was the fact that you guys got the opportunity to work together.
And you acknowledge that it's not easy.
Be careful what you ask for.
Right?
No, it is. It's hard. It's funny because we also have like gifts of love, and my parents have now went and turned that over to my brothers. And I have one brother runs the orphanage, and one in Haiti, and Darren runs over the work in the leadership team and stuff like that. And one thing we said is we barely made it through business. We don't know if we were going to continue in another business or do something, but there's nothing more special, and there's probably nothing more challenging than family and business. But one thing with family and business is you do know that you can trust them. You can rely
100%.
on them. If you have a good solid family already of people you love, you can trust them. You can rely on them. So.
Yeah, I had this thought when we really first started the project that you as a family are kind of like the like I was thinking of like The Godfather, the movie, of like, a tight-knit family, but all of their efforts were for greed and for self-edification, and the family was tight-knit and they stuck together, but it was all about them and building their empire. And your family is like the antithesis of that. It's got the tight-knit family component, recognizing that's not easy in its own right, but then all of the efforts are for good and for the benefit of your employees,
right.
The poor around the globe, literally. That stood out to me.
Yeah, and I think the reason we stuck together, one of the first keys of sticking together was we all make the same amount of money. I mean, that's just, no one makes more than each other.
How much, by the way? Do you want to?
Yeah, at least $10.
Okay.
So we all make the same amount of money. We made that decision years ago, but also about 10 years ago, everybody wants to give back, and, it's community and stuff like that. And we call it tithing. And so we're trying to figure out how we do that. And we made Jesus the sixth man of our company. We're like, okay, whatever we make, he makes. Now he's making more. And so then we make, but that's cool. It all goes back to, we're all going to give an account one day to God. For all of our works, and that's not just a negative. Oh my gosh, I'm going to give an account, but it's like when I go to my dad and I go, Dad, I want to give you, I want to show you what I've done, and I want him to be as excited as I'm as excited. And that's the cool thing about business is they're for you. Most of the time they're for you. And when we go before God, it's like, here's what you gave me, here's my talent I had, and here's what I want. Now I have to offer back to you is what I did with that talent. And I just think about that, and I think the reason I say that is all of us think that way, that we all have a gifting more unique than other. I am not a finance guy. My brother Don is not a sales guy, and he says it in the video. My numbers are always wrong, but we all have a gift, and we know we have to use those properly. And I think we can step away and go, okay, yours is different than mine, as well as I'm going to give it back to you, God, and go, this is what you gave me, and this is what I've done with it.
Well, it's a perfect transition as we wrap up here because now that you have a leadership team in place running the day-to-day of the company, you have more time on your hands and you've expressed a desire. You've already done a lot of speaking engagements and you have a lot to share on family business, just business, faith in business, a lot of components. So if somebody would love for you to come speak to their group, what does that look like and how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, honestly, just contact me. My heart, I'm going to give a plug for my book now.
Yes.
It's called Live and Let Go.
Which I love. I'm looking at this book. I'm like, I was just talking about this yesterday.
Really?
Yeah. That is I read a book, Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
In the book, Think and Grow Rich, there was, and I don't know if it was the book itself or something that I learned outside of the book by exploring YouTube, but there was the big thing of don't take offense to anything.
Yeah.
And the hardest place is on the road when you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off. And you're like, oh, what the hell, but you don't know.
Praise Jesus, right?
That would be the
Something
ideal.
like that.
Yeah. But yeah, I took that to heart, and that was back in 2018. That really changed my life, living and letting go. You know, and I don't know if that's what you mean by that, but to me, it means like if something happens, be aware of the emotions that you're letting go into that. Recognize it. Say, okay, I feel that way. That person might have done that, or but then just let it go.
Yeah.
And move on.
That's right.
Yeah, and the book, I've read it. It does go into your personal details. You're very vulnerable in the book about the good, the bad, and the ugly, so I appreciate that. So Live and Let Go is the book, and it's available on Amazon.
Yeah, and it's not Let Go and Live. There is another book out there called Let Go and Live. But this Live and Let Go. And what this just is about is releasing your hold to find God's purpose. So if you're like, what is my purpose? I mean, even in business, what's my purpose? Why am I doing this? I spent 8 years of I believe God, and how I heard it was just God telling me, and I just heard in my head, let go of this, let go of that. Whether it's the success of the business, that we were at our most successful peak. I had landed our largest account we've ever landed, Walmart. And it was at that time that I felt God say, it's time to let go. I'm like, but I just did it all. We just completed the rebuild of our home, massive home, big home, big barn, everything like that. And God said, it's time to sell. And I'm like, oh. So my wife and I sold the house and moved into a little 1,100 square foot apartment where we are 3 years later. It's letting go of hurts and desire, it's hurts and disappointments in my life, as well as there's hidden things in our life that I have found actually affect our future. And I talk about that. If you get the book, don't skip to the 9th chapter. But if you're only going to read a chapter, read the 9th chapter. It's the one I did not tell the editor about, and it's my true story of what God took me through, my hidden things. But if you would like to get a hold of me, my phone number's out there, 636-734-3535. It's real easy, 636-734-3535. Or my name, Derrick K, DERRIKK, at me, it's all about me.com. So it's DERRIKK@me.com.
Great. And you're willing to travel to speak to organizations?
Yeah, anybody who pays me. No, I'm joking.
Well, let's be clear on that.
But it would be nice to get some compensation for the travel.
Okay, so you can contact Derrick. It's been a pleasure working on this project. I was telling Tom as we record this is a pinch me moment for myself now, 2+ years later from these conversations of what could be, and now we're there. And so it's been a pleasure, and appreciate both of you.
Yeah, and I want to publicly say thank you to both of you, because you took a story that you saw out there and just put it real for future generations. I mean, the work that you did is rippling now through future generations, and how you're able to just bring different characters, different personalities, and make us all look good. So that was awesome.
Yes.
That was Tom.
Yes, nice. That's the idea.
All right. Well, that's a wrap. It's been a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you.